Faltou um de perna de novo, porque era tarde demais e a flecha de sempre e esse aí. Tô aqui, tem umas 2 horas ou mais pensando em fazer isso aqui, só que eu fico só enrolando e fazendo outras coisas. Puta merda. Então bora fazer logo, agora é 12:05, 12:04. Aí hoje vai ser braço de novo. E aí agora o braço voltou para o par. Acho que é o 20 já? 18 não é 18 não, né? É o 20? Não, era o ímpar, né? Porque foi o primeiro. Então agora voltou pro ímpar, acho que é o 19. Vamos lá, vai ser 8 e 6. Eu faço 8 com extrema facilidade no chão, só que o de 6 aqui, esse aqui eu tô morrendo. Mas bora ver se dá um efeito. Brasil. Tem que descansar, né? Povos que descansam é extremamente importante. Descansar entre um outro, só tem um de descanso e a fudência já. First, in early August, the US increased the reward on Maduro to $15 million and accused him of heading up the cartel of the Suns, a Venezuelan crime syndicate recently designated by the US as a terrorist group. Second, the US has carried out a number of airstrikes on Venezuelan boats. Since September, at least 6 boats have been hit, killing at least 38 people. The Trump administration has claimed that the boats were trafficking drugs and operated by various cartels. But no substantial evidence has been provided to corroborate these claims. The UN said in September that the strikes were illegal under international law. This will be particularly worrying for Maduro, given the US has recently claimed that he heads up the cartel himself, and is thus presumably a potential target. Third, the US has amassed a conspicuous amount of firepower in the Caribbean. This began in August, when the US deployed the Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group, a 4,500-troop-strong unit specializing in supporting land invasions to an area off the coast of Venezuela. Since then, more assets have been deployed to the region, including F-35 jets, B-52 bombers, and a nuclear-powered submarine. For his part, Maduro has reacted by mobilizing Venezuela's 350,000-strong army and calling on ordinary Venezuelans to enlist in national militias. Fourth, on Wednesday, Trump confirmed a New York Times story claiming he'd authorized the CIA to carry out covert operations in Venezuela, and even announced that he was considering airstrikes on targets inside the country. You get the idea. Over the past few months, the Trump administration has staged an unprecedented pressure campaign against Venezuela, culminating in an explicit threat of CIA interference and airstrikes earlier this week. But it's still not really clear what the end game is here. For starters, while the military buildup has been impressive, it's nowhere near enough for a successful invasion. Venezuela is a large country with a population of about 30 million people, and in 2018 the Council on Foreign Relations assessed that an American military intervention in Venezuela would require at least 100,000 troops and
2 minutos, tá bom.
disaster.
Bora levantar 3.
Similarly, it's not clear what airstrikes inside Venezuela could achieve strategically. and the most likely effect would be to bolster Maduro's domestic narrative. America's recent experience in Iran should be instructive. Trump and Netanyahu apparently thought their airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, which at least had a strategic rationale, would give way to regime change. But, surprisingly, the opposite sort of happened. The airstrikes triggered a rally round the flag effect, and the Ayatollah's grip on power now looks stronger than it did beforehand. Whatever the end, Trump's focus on Venezuela
Se isso ofenda, vou pegar 10 ruim demais, aí dói a mão. Mas foi só o primeiro. 5 minutos, bora descansar mais 2 minutos agora, depois de 10 segundos de exerção de força.
Now, this story about a potential US invasion of Venezuela is constantly changing and updating as more and more outlets are reporting on it. Right now, there are 437 sources currently reporting on it, with most... Since mid-September, Russia has apparently escalated its hybrid war against NATO countries in Europe, with Denmark, Norway, France, Belgium, Germany, Poland, Romania and Estonia all reporting unidentified drones in their skies, particularly over critical infrastructure.
Até na França os caras chegaram, tá
Such
porra.
commentators are even talking about a shadow drone war in Europe, with some going as far as to argue that Russia has entered phase 0 of its war against NATO. In other words, the phase of setting informational and psychological conditions ahead of an open conflict. So in this video, we'll take a look at the recent increase in Russia-NATO tensions, NATO's new air defence policy, and whether NATO is getting ready for a drone war with Russia. Could you rank every single politician in the world? Here are our thoughts, and argue with us on our podcast, The World Leader Leaderboard. Find it over on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. Let's start by recapping the recent increase in Russia-NATO tensions. In September, suspected Russian drones or military aircraft were spotted above several European NATO countries. 21 Russian drones flew into Polish airspace. 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets flew into Estonian airspace. And unidentified drone sightings were also reported over Romania and near airports or military facilities in Denmark, France, Germany, Norway and Belgium. In response, NATO launched its Eastern Sentry military operation, a collective aerial defence effort involving France, Germany, Denmark and the UK, sending fighter jets to Eastern Europe to patrol the skies over NATO's eastern flank. However, the drone incursions have also exposed weaknesses in NATO's air defences, especially over a lack of cohesion when it comes to decision making.
Tá uma merda mesmo, né? Vai fazer o quê, filho da puta? Fica balançando as bombas atômicas. Em qualquer ameaça.
Alongside this escalation in the skies, since late September, Russia has also stepped up other kinds of high-end attacks, such as accusing the EU, UK and Poland of orchestrating false flag operations to blame Moscow. Earlier this week, 7 armed servicemen in unmarked uniforms were also spotted in an area of Russia close to the eastern.
Abraçando já, vai ficando mais fraco, em vez de aumentar. Quando eu fazia só esses do chão, tava aumentando. Aumentava 2 cada dia, o pai tava sentindo o progresso. Agora estou me sentindo mais fraco cada vez que eu faço.
This allowed Russia to blur the lines between local militias and foreign invaders, complicating Ukraine's ability to respond and delaying international action. This intensified testing of NATO by Russia in recent years has led to a growing consensus among analysts and policymakers that Russia's hybrid war may now have moved to a new, more escalatory phase. This is sometimes known in Western military terms as Phase 0, or in Russian terms as the Special Period. In late September, Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz encapsulated this, saying Europe is not at war, but no longer at peace either. As such, NATO and the EU are now scrambling to improve their air defences and anti-drone capabilities. Individual countries have taken specific measures. Germany, for instance, announced a new law this month allowing shoot-down rogue drones, while Poland has vowed to shoot down Russian aircraft that violate its airspace. But perhaps more significantly, both the EU and NATO are now working on new air defence alliances to allow Europe to respond more effectively to Russian air threats. So what is this new air defence policy actually going to look like? Well, the first thing to say is that this new defence policy coordinates across both NATO and the EU, with NATO taking a lead on strengthening capabilities and decision making, and the EU leading on financing and bringing the defence industry together. Rutte has also stated that there is no duplication between the NATO and EU projects, and that both organisations are working hand in hand. The first and perhaps most eye-catching pillar of this air defence policy are new anti-drone defences on the eastern flank. On Wednesday, Rutte said that NATO will implement a number of additional counter-drone measures, and said the alliance is testing integrated systems that will help us detect, track and neutralise aerial threats. Meanwhile, according to a leaked paper cited in media reports on Thursday, the European Commission is calling for a new European drone defence initiative to be fully functional by the end of 2027, which builds on the idea of a drone war proposed last month by the European Commission, and supported by the Baltic states, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Finland and Denmark. However, France and Germany are reportedly sceptical about the project, because they want to handle big procurement initiatives themselves, rather than have the Commissioner act as a coordinator. The second pillar of NATO's new air defence policy is Odin's Eye, a satellite-based early warning missile detection system led by France and Germany. On Wednesday, the French and German defence ministers signed a joint implementation agreement, with German Defence Minister Boris Pistorius saying, "From space, we aim to spot hostile missiles the moment they're launched. Only then can we intercept them in time." Odin's Eye is a predominantly German and French-led project dating back to at least 2020, intended to provide a European space-based missile
Odin's
detection
Eye.
system against ballistic and hypersonic threats.
Odin perdeu o olho, deu em troca de conhecimento. Satélite, os caras sabem botar nome, né? Ah, fio do chão agora. Deixa aqui de novo.
Odin's Eye is therefore designed to enable Europe's ability to act without the US if it came to it. And finally, the third pillar is NATO's so-called aerial shield. Brought together under NATO's integrated air and missile defence mission, this works through a network of sensors on land, including via the US-supplied Patriot missile defence systems, on sea via destroyers, and in the air via advanced warnings known as aerostats, which are fitted with radars.
Se eu faço esse aqui primeiro, eu faço 6 também, e no outro eu fico morrendo assim.
Carried out in the air by NATO's early
Então,
warning
eu
and
sou melhor
control
nesse exercício não.
and its patrol jets, with allies rotating jets in and out. At the moment, Italy, Spain and Hungary guard the Baltic airspace. Italy patrols Romania, and the Netherlands and Norway
Tem que
patrol
coisar meu corpo pra puxar pro músculo, os outros músculos puxar minha estatura e me levantar. Não consigo fazer com os braços.
Points out there are gaps in NATO's ability to respond to the kind of drones Russia is currently using to attack Ukraine, which are smaller and more difficult for radar to pick out amid other enemy traffic. Many of Europe's existing air defence systems have also been sent to Ukraine, reducing stockpiles in Europe. This is another way that Russia is attempting to sow division among its allies, by forcing them to choose between supplying systems to Ukraine or keeping them for themselves. Now, the news about Russia-NATO tensions is constantly changing and updating as more and more outlets are reporting. Pakistan has had a tough few years since the Taliban took over Afghanistan in 2021. Despite staying on good terms with the Taliban throughout the American invasion, much to Washington's irritation, once the Taliban retook power, relations immediately cratered, largely because the Taliban has continued to host a number of terror groups operating in Pakistan. There have been regular skirmishes along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border ever since. But things escalated earlier this month, when Pakistan launched airstrikes on Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, essentially signalling to the Taliban that Pakistan would now hold them directly responsible for terror attacks originating in Afghanistan. This sparked a series of skirmishes along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border that ended in hundreds of deaths. So in this video, we thought we'd take a look at this recent escalation, and why, even if a ceasefire has been agreed for now, a full-on war looks worryingly inevitable. If you're interested in the political alliances and groupings which shape our world, then you might enjoy our poster, Every Alliance Explained. It shows in slightly confusing detail all of the world's major alliances and how different countries link together. Check out the poster by clicking the link in the description. So let's start with some context. For most of recent history, the Taliban and Pakistan have actually been pretty good mates. The Taliban were originally a faction within the Afghan Mujahideen, who were supported by both the United States and Pakistan in their fight against the Soviets in the 80s. Pakistan continued to support the group after its emergence in 1994, and many of its recruits came from Afghan refugees studying in Islamic religious schools, known as madrasas in Pakistan. When the Taliban conquered Kabul in 1996 and established the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, it received international recognition from just 3 countries: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Pakistan. Ever since, Pakistan has maintained relations with the Taliban, even after the US invaded and forced the Taliban out of Kabul in 2001. Unsurprisingly, this became a point of contention between Pakistan and the US, but Pakistan was unwilling to cut ties with the Taliban, both because Pakistan, correctly, thought there was a chance the Taliban would return to power once the US withdrew, and because Pakistan hoped the Taliban
Chururu
might
predict.
also act as a regional counterbalance against
Middle East na merda de sempre.
power.
News.
Still had influence in Afghanistan, and Pakistan needed a on the side to prevent them from hosting and exporting terror groups from Afghanistan into Pakistan, including most notably the Pakistani Taliban, or TTP, who've waged a violent insurgency against the Pakistani state since 2007. When the Taliban did return to power, Pakistani officials apparently expected the Taliban to repay them for their support by cracking down on other terror groups operating out of Afghanistan, including the TTP. But that's
Chega a
not
sentir já peso, velho.
Instead, the Taliban mediated
Como é que eu vou conseguir fazer o dali?
TTP and Pakistan, which led to a ceasefire in August until December 2021. But once the ceasefire expired, the Taliban just let the TTP continue operating inside Afghanistan, and TTP attacks inside Pakistan restarted with increasing frequency. Pakistani officials have also accused the Taliban of providing safe haven for other terror groups, like the Baloch Liberation Front, a Baloch separatist group that has staged a number of attacks inside Pakistan recently, including a train hijacking in March early this year, which required a massive hostage rescue operation and ended with at least 26 deaths. For their part, the Taliban have always denied these allegations, but these denials now look pretty implausible. The TTP's leader, for instance, is literally based in Kabul, Afghanistan's capital. Afghanistan's role as de facto safe haven has allowed these groups to carry out an unprecedented number of attacks in Pakistan. According to the Center for Research and Security Studies, in 2024, at least 685 Pakistani security personnel were killed in terror attacks or counter-terrorist operations, up about 40% compared to 2023 and the highest figure since 2015. 2025 looks unlikely to be much better. In the first 9 months of this year, 512 security personnel have already been killed in hundreds of terror attacks and counter-terrorism operations. Anyway, in response to these terror attacks, Pakistan has occasionally carried out strikes on TTP targets inside Afghanistan, but these were, until recently, confined to sparsely populated border areas. However, after a spate of terror attacks at the start of this month that killed at least 24 Pakistani security personnel, on Thursday last week, Pakistan took things up a notch by apparently launching airstrikes on targets in Kabul. While Pakistan didn't officially claim responsibility for the strikes, the intended message was pretty clear. Pakistan was signalling that they would hold the Taliban directly responsible for attacks against Pakistan by terror groups operating out of Afghanistan, and that Taliban strikes in Kabul would therefore be legitimate targets for retaliation. The strikes also coincided with the arrival of the Taliban foreign minister in India, the first such trip since the Taliban's return to power in 2021. This is another point of tension at the moment. While Pakistani strategists originally hoped to form a sort of anti-India alliance with the Taliban, and India did used to be one of the Taliban's many enemies, the two countries have seen somewhat of a rapprochement in recent years, motivated by both mutual antipathy towards Pakistan and a pragmatic acceptance on India's part that the Taliban will probably be in power for the foreseeable future. Only a couple of days ago, India announced that it would be reopening the embassy in Kabul, which was shut 4 years ago. Anyway, 2 days later, on Saturday, the Taliban retaliated by attacking a number of Pakistani positions along the border. Fighting continued over the weekend, and on Sunday, the Taliban claimed to have killed 58 Pakistani soldiers, while Pakistan claimed it had killed at least 200 Taliban fighters. While these numbers are probably exaggerated, this would probably be the
Filho do chão, né? Eu tenho que me levantar. Eita porra. Pai já era.
Fighting get resumed on Tuesday.
6 coisas eu não consigo, velho. Quando criança eu fazia tanto, os músculos é foda, hein? Tá voltando a aparecer o bagulho aqui. Tá bem visível, velho. Tá mais visível uns dias atrás. Tá caindo.
But while this might provide some temporary respite, it's hard to see things getting better anytime soon. The Taliban have shown no interest in expanding the terror groups operating out of Afghanistan, and Pakistan has proved willing to escalate as evidenced
Fica
by
assim, velho.
recent strikes in
Tentando
Kabul.
fazer o halal
This
party, mas tá bem
operation,
difícil.
Taliban's intransigence and Pakistan's combative posture is obviously pretty dangerous. Unless what conflicts, there's a risk that they get stuck in an escalatory cycle, which is sort of what happened for the past couple of years, that could ultimately culminate in a full-on war. This might sound melodramatic, but it's really not clear what the alternative is. The status quo is clearly unsustainable. It's almost hard to imagine any other country tolerating hundreds of security personnel fatalities every year. And the Taliban have proved remarkably unresponsive, even in recent airstrikes on Kabul.
O músculo trava assim, eu não consigo botar mais força e subir, velho. Isso tá pesado, tá ligado? Eu sou leve. Mas alguma coisa pifa que eu não consigo ter força pra continuar. O músculo cansa. Será que me falta uma creatina, uma coisa pra ter as ATP no músculo pra ativar?
Future tech news will be delivered by a holographic host. It'll be just like the Doctor from Star Trek Voyager, except it'll probably be me or Linus or Riley instead of Robert Picard. But we are in talks with Picard. Steam has set a new concurrent player record for itself. Data from SteamDB shows that Valve's platform recently surpassed 41.6 million simultaneous users. That's more than the population of Canada, bud, and nearly double the player count from just 5 years ago. Seems like PC gamer growth accelerated after the WHO declared a pandemic, the only world event that was notable enough to include on their chart. I bet about half that player jump was from Among Us. Pretty sus. Steam's new record high comes after Battlefield 6, Hades 2, and Hollow Knight Silksong all broke their own franchise player records as well, so clearly the lesson for gaming companies here is to keep pumping out sequels. That's what we all want, right? Do it like the movies do. That said, I can't help but notice that the total number of users increased more than the number of users in-game, which reads to me like people are spending more time staring at their bloated Steam backlog than actually playing their games. Let this be a call to action. Go beat something off the backlog. It's time to finally play Disco Elysium or Red Dead Redemption 2. No new games until you beat those ones. OpenAI has stopped letting people generate fake videos of Martin Luther King Jr. at the request of the late Dr. King's estate. Apparently his family wasn't jazzed about OpenAI's slop-only TikTok clone being filled to the brim with disrespectful depictions of MLK delivering a stirring speech on the beauty of the female form. It's yet another feature rollback from OpenAI, who always seems to focus more on the latter part of the move fast and break things. But at least OpenAI isn't pulling a Facebook and rummaging through your phone's local storage and editing one of your photos with AI without you even asking it to, like a cat bringing you a dead mouse. What are you supposed to do with it? Thankful? That feature rolled out in beta this past summer and is now launching more widely for some reason. You can opt out at any time if you're aware that it's happening in the first place. And didn't
Tô ficando cansado, só que não tá dando as dores, o músculo técnico, simplesmente cansado. Tem que fazer o que será? Tô fazendo o que de errado? Posso fazer mais, eu acho que. Acho que pra 12. Não sei se eu faço muito. Mas fica bom. Quebrado. Vive caindo essa coisinha, velho. O barulho desse aqui é foda, né?
Find out who's reporting on what, so you can understand why. Take the first step, get the transparency you deserve from the news, and save 40% on ground news Vantage plan by using our link in the description. Robert Picardo frequently collaborates with director Joe Dante, who just so happens to be one of the Quick Bit's favorite directors. Gremlins is a Christmas classic, and Phil Hartman is sublime in Small Soldiers. Small Soldiers. Kip Kelligan. I'll take a sequel to that. Am I a menace? Apple is apparently cutting production of the new iPhone Air. According to Japan's Mizuho Securities, while the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max models are seeing higher sales than their predecessors, the new iPhone Air is a sales letdown. Now Apple is chopping production of the Air down by up to 1 million units this year, down by up to what the language? Similarly, a report from Newspim in Korea alleges that Samsung has halted work on the Galaxy S26 Edge, letting employees know that the product line is to be discontinued. The news isn't totally unexpected. The S25 Edge didn't sell well, and like Gizmodo said, slim phones might be on thin ice. Well, it looks like these thin phones are about to be skinny dipping in the discount.
Os caras fizeram o telefone fino e pifou e os caras agora tá parando. Como desgraça decidiu pra fazer esse negócio, velho?
With the power of SAS. Or sauce, if you're in the UK. After calling out the architectural brittleness in Microsoft's infrastructure and saying Microsoft 365 crashes are a question of when and for how long, not if, which I'm pretty sure is the software engineer's equivalent of a glove slap, Google talks up its new cost-effective Google Workspace plans meant to help businesses transition away from Office, which is now called Microsoft 365. What a boring and confusing name. Wouldn't you rather subscribe to a workplace plan called Business Continuity or Work Transformation Set? Wouldn't you? Uber is launching a new program that allows its contractors to earn additional cash by telling jokes as they drive. You know, testing out new bits. I'm just joking. It's additional cash by completing micro tasks that train AI models. That's way worse. These tasks include everything from voice recording to capturing and uploading images to submitting documents in a certain language in exchange for variable rewards. In this example, if you upload a picture from a Spanish restaurant menu, you could earn a whole shiny dollar. A greenback. I've always dreamed of being a mental blood bag for AI. This move could help Uber use its army of freelance workers to challenge companies that train AI models by having humans annotate the data themselves. They're already constantly feeding customers via Uber Eats. Why not feed the hungry machine your time, energy, and knowledge as well? It's the same thing. That's my job. And PayPal's blockchain partner, Paxos, mistakenly minted $300 trillion in PYUSD stablecoin. As pointed out by both CNBC and Engadget, 300 trillion of these stablecoins are worth more than double the world's estimated total GDP. It just seems like there's something terribly wrong when you can just accidentally mint more money than the global GDP. Like, thankfully, this all appears to be a huge and embarrassing gaffe. And don't worry, Paxos tweeted to assure folks that the issue was a technical error and that their customers' funds are safe. Paxos even says they burned the excess PYUSD. I've been known to burn through a lot of excess money myself, but I really hope that's okay. The coins still pay. Don't worry. And you should know what I mean when I say peg, when I tell you to come back on Monday for more tech news. I can't promise you we'll have holograms by Monday, but I swear I'm working really hard on Picardo.
Essa música do bicho, velho. Também é foda, hein? Eu tento fazer 6, vou até falha. Consegui fazer do outro, né? Também esteja melhorando um pouco, mas tá foda, vamos tentar. Falta um. Aí fiz, ó. Essa falha desse negócio é muito feia, velho. Pago fudido. Deixa eu me jogar no chão aqui. Faço 6 no chão aqui, quer ver? mais falhei nesse. Meti mais 8. Meti 12. Falhei, mas foi no quinto set. Ui. Agora um negócio mais digno do que parar naquele outro ali. Vai ser isso aí, valeu.